welcome to Food Feels Banana Peels. Today I'm really excited to talk to Lisa Marie DeSanto. She's going to talk to us today about her journey through menopause and hormonal imbalances and how they manifested in her body. And I can't wait for you to hear her story and all of the wisdom and guidance that she has learned and passes on for us today. The lovely Lisa Marie DeSanto is joining us from Connecticut. Lisa Marie, I'm so excited to have you here to chat about your story. You have so much to share. Your experience is likely going to resonate with so many women our age, in their 40s and their 50s, that are going through changes. Sometimes we're told that things are normal or we have to endure this stuff. And your story is going to show us that there can be many, many different facets of what we're going through hormonally as women. And sometimes we need to look and dig a little bit deeper. So thank you so much, Lisa Marie, for being here to speak with us today on Food Feels Banana Peels.
It's so great to be here. And I love the way you just summarized my life so succinct. But yes, all of those things, everything you said. Yes.
But there's so much more that we're going to dive deep into today, Lisa Marie. And I'm so grateful for you to be sharing your story, because hormonal issues for middle-aged women are so prevalent and they're starting earlier. There are women now who are starting perimenopause in their 30s. This never used to happen 20, 30 years ago. And so we need to be really educating ourselves on what is normal hormonal symptoms and then when things kind of deviate off the track. And that's a lot about where your story is going to go today. So I'd love if you would introduce yourself and tell us about yourself, please.
Oh, yeah, sure. I guess you could call me a multi-passionate creative. I typically make my living as a content director, content developer, and storyteller in the corporate world. But I was recently laid off and I'm exploring whether or not I wanted to go back into the corporate world, whether I want to venture out and do something that sort of builds my own brand, possibly a combination of both for a while. And I guess, it's interesting to share that I also got my start as a theater performer. So, for fun and inspiration, I like to keep my hand in hobbies and projects that are closely related to that. But I'm really excited about my latest project, which is a podcast that I'll be launching in February. It's all about taking life's lemons and rather than turning them into lemonade, which is, kind of mundane, I say turn it into limoncello.
Yum.
I'm Italian by descent, so I like to live life with a little more zest and passion than just some, basic lemonades.
Beautiful. So the name of your podcast, we'll do it at the end again, but let's put it out there right away.
Yeah, thank you. It's called From Lemons to Limoncello, and you can
Love
find
it.
it on right now, actually, on Apple and Spotify. The trailer's up, but again, the episodes will be launching in February.
Amazing. I'm sure we're going to have lots of people joining in after they listen to our conversation today and all that you have to share and offer. Your transition from your day job, if you will, in corporate to what you're doing now, have you noticed a change in how you're feeling? Was corporate something that you were really passionate about in your life, or is that something that you are leaving behind with a smile on your face?
It's kind of a mixed bag, and I'm really glad you asked that question. It's important for me to kind of assess where I am in any given moment, and it changes from day to day. I never thought that I'd love corporate work. I started out, as I said, as a theater performer and was highly, highly creative, but I think we make a lot of decisions based on security and a need for a feeling of stability. And at a time, I was a single mother and I needed the health insurance, and there are just a variety of reasons why I went further and further down that sort of traditional work path. And in retrospect, I think a lot of the choices that I made were based on need and out of fear, as opposed to what I really wanted and what was going to feel aligned with who I most was at my core. And so I did learn to love parts of the corporate work. You can be creative in corporate work. It's interesting. I mean, I've worked in marketing. It's a different kind of creativity because corporate creativity is sort of a juxtaposition of opposing terms, right? I mean, you can be creative, but it's a very different kind of creative. It's much more cerebral. It's much more aligned with corporate goals versus creating from your heart and from your soul.
Mhm.
And so definitely as time has gone on, I've missed that feeling of creativity and birthing things myself. And so while I'm sad to leave behind that expertise and respect that I developed, that's a heady experience when you start to feel important in your job. But I think what happens is, and this is a really good segue into what happened with me physically. What happens is you forget who you are when you're not using all of those pieces of yourself
Yes.
that are your biggest gifts. And so while I loved that piece of it, I really did start to feel a bit empty, like bits of me that were so important were not getting used or given to the world. And also that I wasn't getting back from the world what I think was going to make me feel most fulfilled because I wasn't aligned with who I really was. So it is a mixed bag, and I am sad to leave certain bits of it behind, but I'm also really excited about stepping more fully into who I am at my core again.
Absolutely. And when we remove those rigid barriers and boundaries that are in place when we're working for someone else, I worked in the dental industry as an orthodontic dental hygienist for 20 years. And it was definitely an experience. And like you, I had a lot of experience. I was very good at what I did. And there were elements of the job that I definitely could say that I enjoyed. However, I was very much this is my scope and this is what I can do. So it was breaking out of that and working on my own. And, it used to be transforming people's smiles. And now I work with transforming people from the inside out. And it's just so much more rewarding because I get to step into, just like you, who I am. This is me. This is my story. And now I'm going to share it without anyone telling me, oh, you can only share these parts. You can only be this much. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the journey that has involved some physical issues. And can you tell us how that began, how you began to recognize that there was imbalance in your body, and then how that kind of began to progress?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's been, I'm not even going to say it was because it's still evolving, but I've come such a long way and I'm so grateful. I would say it's been a pretty intense journey for about 3 years. It started 3 years ago, let's just say. At the time, I found myself just feeling physically awful. I was exhausted all the time. I was lucky if I was getting 3 hours of sleep, though, which was a really strange sort of dichotomy. I had all the symptoms of a sinus infection and a urine tract infection and a vaginal infection, and each one would come and go. Sometimes it was all at the same time. Sometimes they would sort of alternate. But meanwhile, I'd go to the doctor and I'd never have any signs of an actual infection, right? Just the symptoms. And the scary thing for me was that my liver, my cortisol, and cholesterol levels were all through the roof. And I was finding it really hard to function day to day because I just don't know how else to say it. My body started to feel so fragile at a time in my life when everyone told me, my daughter had just moved out. She had moved to Brooklyn and was self-sufficient. She graduated from college. So this was a time in my life when everyone said I was supposed to feel so energized and powerful. And I felt like my body was breaking down. And looking back, I do think it really was.
So you had all of these signs and these symptoms, and obviously there was some blood work involved. Tell us how you began to navigate the symptoms, who you went to initially, and what you were told.
Yeah, that's a great, great question. At first, the fatigue got so bad that it actually felt like almost worse than Epstein-Barr syndrome or mono, if you've ever had
Mm-hmm,
either.
mm-hmm.
I had it as actually, I had Epstein-Barr as a teenager, and it was that same sort of just general can't get up, can't function. And so I eventually went to my GP and my gynecologist, and I was literally in tears, and that's not like me. I mean, as I've described, I mean, I work in a pretty high energy, high power sort of arena, and I'm used to juggling 20 things at once and being positive and finding solutions to problems. I was leveled. It was a bit of a nightmare. I was just hoping they'd be able to help. My GP put me on an antibiotic for my sinuses because even though I didn't show signs of an infection, he just kind of had this, there must be something going on in there, right? So he gave me an antibiotic for my sinuses. And at the time, really wasn't showing much of an interest in digging deeper initially into the other symptoms because he kind of passed it off as, well, it's likely menopause, right? You said it earlier. This is just sort of a common response. So I went to my gynecologist thinking she might know better. And she also did feel that the fatigue and the UTI and vaginal symptoms seemed related to menopause. So she recommended that I come off the pill, which I'd been on for like 30 years. Too long, I know. There are reasons, but don't judge me.
I am not judging. No judgment here whatsoever, my friend. We all have
Um,
our reasons for doing what we do. Absolutely.
Yeah, but and I think in some ways it helped because it had been keeping my hormone levels somewhat stable. But even talking to you right now, in retrospect, my mother and my grandmother went through menopause in their 30s and 40s, respectively, I believe, if I have those numbers right. And so it is possible I was in menopause for a long time and just didn't know because when you're on the pill, you sort of have this fake menstrual cycle, chemically, medically induced menstrual cycle. So she basically said, I think you need to come off. Let's get a baseline. And she took me off cold turkey, which in retrospect, I'm not sure that was the right choice because all I can say is I felt worse really quickly. In short, well, maybe not so short, but I'll try. Within days of starting the antibiotic, my body had turned bright red. And I mean, not hives, just my entire body turned bright red. And I felt like I was itching from the inside out at a level that I don't even think I can find the words for. I mean, like my organs felt itchy, my blood felt like sludge. And the initial attack lasted about 8 weeks. And then it proceeded to come and go on and off of that for an entire year. It wasn't even responding to the steroids that he'd added into the mix, and he couldn't explain it. But simultaneously, coming off of the pill so suddenly also seemed to throw my hormones into a complete tailspin. So I started developing even more symptoms on top of the fatigue and all of the vaginal and sinus symptoms. Food started sitting in my stomach like a rock after I'd eat. I was losing hair. I felt anxious all the time. I had heart palpitations. I was exhausted, but now I had this terrible insomnia. And that became a problem because I was so sleep deprived that it started impacting my ability to stay positive while my body felt like it was falling apart. So I really needed to keep my wits about me because of my job, because of my life. My GP's recommendation at that point was for me to start seeing different specialists for each of my individual symptoms. So, I mean, you're going to laugh because you know so much more. And I did not know any of this then, but I do now. He wanted me to see a gastroenterologist for my digestion and a dermatologist for the itching and endocrinologist for, the fatigue. And then he said, just cut out red meat and fatty foods to address the liver concern, which was crazy because at the time I was eating very healthy, or at least I thought I was, and I wasn't eating a lot of red meat to begin with. So I was beyond frustrated. And I just remember, and I don't know where this came from, but thank God maybe a little angel was sitting on my shoulder. I just remember literally giving him the timeout symbol and saying, listen, if you send me to all of these specialists, I know exactly what's going to happen. They're all going to treat the symptoms that they specialize in. None of them are going to talk to each other. And I don't see how they're going to come up with any common denominator. So doesn't it make sense to kind of look at my body as a whole and maybe figure out what the root cause is? And I swear to God, he looked at me like I had two heads.
And that right there sums up. And now I'm not putting everybody into this category, but allopathic versus naturopathic medicine and the holistic view of the body. In allopathic medicine, we're these pieces of ourselves, and it's not necessarily looked at the interconnectedness of the whole organism. And then in natural medicine, we look at the entire organism and all the pieces and how they add up to create what's going on. We are looking for root causes as opposed to symptoms. Symptoms can be very masking of what the actual root cause is. And so when you talk about stopping eating red meat, what about all those pharmaceuticals that were being continued to be pumped into your body that require the liver and the kidneys to detoxify? Another one on top
Yes.
of another one on top of another one. And here's an organ that's function is severely impaired. Let's go ahead and give it more toxins to try and handle.
My God, yes, 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 and yes. And that to me, I didn't know any of this yet because, we're brought up on this idea that when you're sick, you go to the doctor. But I was complaining about this to a colleague who said to me, I think you need a naturopath. And I said, first of all, I don't think it's going to be covered by insurance. And second of all, I don't even know what that is. Like, how do we, right? But I'm going to tell you what, I owe her everything because I did find one. There was one in my insurance plan, and she's amazing because she looked at my body as a whole. And she, by the way, looked at the same blood work that the GP did and saw different markers and things that gave her clues. And even up my journal, because I'd started tracking my itching, when it was occurring, how often it was occurring, the intensity, right? So she looked at all of those same results and all the same data, and she just saw these clues that the GP didn't. And you said something really interesting because what she said, I don't remember what you said before, but it made me think of this. She explained that my cholesterol levels weren't the problem. They were an indicator that my body had some other problem. She compared cholesterol like water to a fire and said that my body was clearly trying to put some other fire out. And it was visuals like that and metaphors like that I think she was so gifted and so able to make me look at my body in a completely different way, right? So she ran additional tests and she found that I have an autoimmune condition called mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS. She compared my liver to a garbage company that's gone on strike. And she said it's like all the toxins in my liver weren't being expelled. So they were literally backing up into my body.
Yes.
So that combined with the MCAS was the reason that I was having these bouts with the itching that I was. We did some food sensitivity testing and we found that all these foods that I was eating that were so healthy that I thought were healthy, because traditionally they would be considered healthy, like chicken and turkey, I actually had food sensitivities to. So I was
Mhm.
literally poisoning myself. And then she really went into great detail about how all of these hormone imbalances from the menopause were the reasons why I was having trouble digesting my food and my stress levels were off the charts because your hormones impact your cortisol levels, which therefore can mimic or cause anxiety. My sleep patterns, all of these symptoms that the doctor just passed off as menopause. She went into deeper discussion about why so that we could start treating the cause instead of masking the symptoms. She was able to show me how it was all connected, and it was such a gift.
To be able to understand, really have comprehension, and somebody that take the time to explain to you what's actually going on with your body. You're not nuts. You're not imagining these things are happening, not just these random things just beginning to happen for no reason. There really is a deeper root. And I firmly believe that knowledge is power. And so when we begin to understand what's going on, then we have the ability to empower ourselves to make those decisions that we feel are best for us when we have somebody who we feel is knowledgeable, who we trust, and who supports us in our journey. It makes all of the difference. So tell us about the naturopathic approach.
I also just want to back up. Thank you for saying what you said, because I think what I didn't understand, and I think what I would say to anyone out there who's having problems like this, and I just think it's one of the most important things that you just like, that people need to know, but you just hit the nail on the head. I cried constantly, but it wasn't just because of the hormonal imbalances and the exhaustion. It was because I felt completely invalidated. I think that the one of the biggest things, one of the biggest benefits of working with this naturopath was just being validated. I think women all over are made to feel crazy, and meanwhile their bodies feel, you literally feel like you're dying. In extreme cases, you have no control over your body, you don't recognize it, and it's frightening. It's really frightening. So I don't mean to not acknowledge your question. It's just that I think it's really important to kind of go there because you just said it so well. It's the validation that, I had been lacking, that I think when I met her, I actually cried tears of joy. It was that bad. I mean, like I was at the end of my rope. But so yes, supplements and what holistically, what did she do? Sorry, I just had to go there.
That's great. And it's really important to find somebody along the path that helps you feel that way, that
Right.
can support you, that gives you that sense of comfort, sense of hope. And it's important for people to know that sometimes things that are brushed off as normal, we know our bodies. We've actually become very out of touch with our bodies, women, men, just about everybody. When our bodies begin to speak so loudly, like yours was and like mine was on my journey, there becomes a point that you can't ignore it anymore.
No.
First of all, I believe we need to get more in touch with our bodies, and we need to begin to understand the physiology of each of ourselves as individuals, because nobody fits into a box. We have billions
Right.
of people on this earth, and we cannot possibly categorize them, and everybody is completely different. And then number two, normal. What is normal? Normal is balanced for ourselves. These symptoms are signs our body is speaking to us.
Yeah, and ride it out. That's the other one. Oh, just ride it out. It's temporary. But I also was reading that for some women, menopausal and postmenopausal symptoms can last up to 14 years. That is a
Oh.
long temporary, right? And I was like, look, if I'm having this type of complication and this intensity, if I'm a 14-year-er, for lack of a better way to put it, that's a long ride it out, right?
It's
And I
hell.
think
That sounds like hell.
it's
Hell for
total
14
hell.
years.
And then when I'm 80, what do I do? Right.
Right.
So that really is not quality of life. And that was, coming back to your question, that was the approach that my naturopath wanted me to take, finding balance so that the ride was less cumbersome, painful, take your pick. There are so many words to describe what it all felt like. So she took a multi-pronged approach. First thing she did was she just put me on a variety of supplements, natural supplements, as opposed to chemically made
Mm-hmm.
medicines,
Yeah.
to address the deficiencies and the imbalances, and to try to get those closer to level, to detox my liver, restore my gut health, help me digest my food, and sleep. Sleep was huge. She also had me eliminate certain foods from my diet because there were the common ones like the wheat and the cow dairy, but also the ones that my body specifically has sensitivities to, because you're right, normal's different for everyone, and don't please put people in a box. And the medical profession loves to do that. And that's another thing too with wheat and with cow dairy. I learned so much about food and what we put into our bodies, and the fact that this country, unfortunately, genetically modifies everything and puts pesticides on the plants, which are eaten by the animals, and we're ingesting both. And it's a real problem, right? So that was very much the physical start. But she also asked me about my childhood and my past relationship traumas and what my day-to-day stressors were. And first I thought, oh, this is really lovely. I'm sort of getting therapy and medicine all in one, right? Like the right kind of medicine, of course. But what she taught me was how all of those factors were being held in my body. And then she really encouraged me to find ways to address the past traumas, minimize the stress in my life, And sometimes that included setting boundaries, maybe relating to people rather than having a relationship with them, right?
Hmm.
Some people are just not going to heal at your level or have any interest in being more relatable at all in healthy ways. And other times it meant loving or not loving people from a distance, right?
Hmm.
Ultimately, I would say within 3 months of working with her, I was digesting my food. I was sleeping 6, 7 hours a night. I stopped losing my hair. That was just such a gift because as a woman and your body's changing, you're already feeling maybe not less than, but just you don't know what to make of this new you. And then on top of that, you're losing hair. That was frightening. Within 6 months, so that was almost a year and a half of living with that awful itching madness. We had the itching down to a manageable level. And now, about a year later, after working with her, I really only have bouts when I experience like extreme temperature changes. That's part of the MCAS diagnosis. Or if I've had a few days where I don't eat quite as religiously as I should, maybe then it'll bring on a bout of itching. And I learn my lesson a little more each time. It doesn't happen often, but I am trying to be better about eating better. And I'm really grateful because at its worst, that itching was so bad that I was desperate to kind of step out of my own skin. And you can't do that, obviously. I don't want people listening to think it was like, oh, I was walking around scratching all the time. No, it was literally impacting my breathing. And it had me so worn down that I really felt hopeless. Now, today, I have a plan. When the itching symptoms pop up, I can manage them and knock on wood. It seems to be limited to my hands and feet now sometimes. And we're watching for diabetes too, because that runs in my family. So, but that's all related as well, right? Like it's all connected. Now I know.
So in holistic health, I don't know if your naturopath used this analogy, but I use it a lot with clients. And we say we all have a bucket, and our immune system is like a bucket. And each of us have a different size bucket. And so yours might be this big, mine might be this big, the next person is somewhere in the middle. And so all of our experiences, whether those are physical, those are mental, those are emotional, those are spiritual, experiences, they all go in there. So the traumas, the food we're eating, the environmental toxins, every single thing goes in there. And we don't really know how big our bucket is until our bucket begins to spill over. And that's when we begin to see these more severe health symptoms, and why it's so important to begin to recognize what serves our body early so that we can avoid that spillage of all of those toxins literally into our bloodstream. And this is where we find a lot of adult onset allergies and food sensitivities happening. We're eating things that we think should be okay, let's say like chicken, and how the chicken is processed and raised. The chickens who are living in a cage for 28 days and slaughtered. I mean, imagine the energetic imprint on those chickens that we're then ingesting. So that's a whole nother story. We're putting these foods into our body. And for a lot of us, we eat the same thing all the time, right? Day after day, we'll have the same breakfast for 12 days in a row, and then maybe we'll switch it up. The foods over time begin to elicit their own sensitivity. The body, the immune system says, hey, hang on a second. Like, we're having this so much, we're going to recognize this as an invader now. This is now a pathogen, almost like you would recognize a virus. And so now we have to take all of our energy, our immune cells, and we have to begin to destroy this because it's foreign. And really, it's something that normally, if we should be able to process and use. But when your bucket is full, you're feeding yourself the same thing over and over and over again. This is where this autoimmune stuff begins to come up for us.
Yeah, I read recently that are the largest demographic for developing autoimmune conditions. We take on a lot, we live with a lot. The hormonal imbalances that come at the varying stages of our lives. And I really love what you said about bucket sizes, because I don't know that I've ever shared this with you so far, but when I was very, very young, I was 12. My parents were having a very loud argument one night, which wasn't so unusual, right? But the loud argument turned into thumping and bumping. And I knew something was wrong. And I remember walking to the doorway to open the door to look into the living room where I knew that they were. and my father was strangling my mother. It was highly traumatic. And, it's funny because the reason I bring this up is not to elicit sympathy, but what I do want to say is when you're young and you grow up in environments, or, maybe when you're not so young, maybe you're older, but you get to a phase where you're in survival mode all the time, you become very used to functioning at that level. And so that becomes your reality and your norm. And talk about like what's normal. You think somehow that this is normal. And so you're just used to solving problems, meeting the stress where the stress meets you, coming up with solutions. But this has been my life since the age of
Mhm.
12. You bring those sort of expectations or lack of expectations to your adult relationships. You find yourself in financial pressure and survival situations. My life for decades was, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. And I did have it, but it was at such an expense to my body. And so, talking to what I mentioned earlier about, let's talk about your past traumas. I think when your body is used to operating at that high level of go all the time, what ends up happening is you can stub your toe and your body's natural reaction is going to go into such a fight or flight response because it can't tell whether you've stubbed your toe or a truck is bearing down on you. So I had to take a really serious look at my internal stress levels as a contributor to the problem as well. And so it was just a vicious cycle. My body was stressing me, my stress was stressing my body. I think it is all connected, and it was not something that I had ever really realized before, because again, as a young person, you believe that your body is indestructible.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
somehow you just imagine as you age that I'm going to feel great until I don't. And that'll be when I'm 80. And then, no, it's a progression.
That's
And
right.
what you do and what you to your body, what you put in your body, what you allow to be done to you as a human being, what you put up with, what you choose not to put up with, that all impacts our wellness or unwellness.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very well said and very insightful. Disease is a big teacher for many of us. And when you talk about stress levels, we're running on high stress for many of us for a long time. And we've taught our bodies that this is the way it is. So, this fight or flight, the nervous system was designed in primitive times for us when we were in life threatening danger. We are being chased by a bear. We got to kick that cortisol to fight. But so many of us are living that for so long with these stress levels elevated, cortisol elevated, then the adrenal glands get fatigued and obviously burnout with the adrenals themselves. And stress exacerbates disease. And when we've taught our nervous systems that operating at this level is where we are every single day, there's nowhere to go. Breathwork and yoga for me have been instrumental in beginning to train my nervous system to come down. And so we are unlearning what we have known to be our normal physiology for such a long time that is so taxing on our systems.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that's huge. The unlearning piece, right? Because as I was saying earlier, you grow up with certain ideas of what normal is. And it's not till you're older and maybe you're lucky enough to find a great naturopath or someone like yourself to kind of just point to you and say, you do know that that's not healthy, right? And then you're forced to face it. And yeah, there are tools that I find really helpful. I mean, obviously, I take the supplements every day. I try to, choose organic foods where I can when they're an option. I'm big on practicing gratitude. It has changed my life. It's just easier to be in a positive mindset when you're focusing on all of the things you do have to be grateful for. And that's most important when things are tough. And that is actually when I learned to practice gratitude long before I started this health journey. I was really down on my luck, and I realized I'm probably attracting a lot more not so good things because I'm wallowing in the place of lack and worry and fear. So that was a really good beginning. I highly recommend practicing gratitude. I'm also really lucky to live 13 minutes from the beach, from the ocean.
Mm,
I live in coastal Connecticut, so I try to get down to the beach to breathe in sea air. I think
hmm.
there's something very cathartic and healing about that. And also to walk barefoot. I don't even care how cold it is, because whatever I'm going through in that given moment, there's something about the feel of my feet in the sand, and hearing and literally feeling the ocean rhythm. It just grounds me immediately. At my worst, it might take a few minutes, but it's the one thing I can really, really count on. I don't think I could ever leave the coast. What I do need to work on, and it's a process. I know that this is going to keep evolving as my body does. I'm going to have to evolve with it because I'm just of that certain age, right? What I need to work on next is getting, some kind of movement in on a more regular basis. I'm building up to exercise now that my energy's coming back. And that's a big piece of this too, knowing that this is a journey and that I'm going to have to kind of be kind to myself. I'm not in my 20s. I can't just like jump on a treadmill and run for 60 minutes. It probably wouldn't be good for me. So I'm trying to be kinder to my body as well and listen to what it can handle so that I don't push too hard and go too fast and then set myself further back. But I've improved already so much. I've gone from feeling like I was dying to feeling fairly decent. Now I want to start working on feeling good. And I believe now, thanks to all the holistic health approaches, that that's attainable.
Absolutely. I love that you brought in nature. So nature
Yeah.
is a healer, right? Nature is a big go-to. I try to be out there every day because, you talked about your feet in the earth. Well, that's grounding. We spend
Mhm.
so much time up here. The earth actually has the ability to transmute what will let go to it through its negative ions. So it'll actually help us to change our energy when we connect with it and let go. And water is about emotions. It's your second chakra, it's emotions. So all of these things that you're talking about, I mean, physiologically they have very major effects on your body, and you and I have chatted a little bit about energetic imbalances, and we talked about your hands and your feet being a primary place, and well, that's the root chakra, and that's the first one, and that involves safety and security, and you're putting your feet on the earth and you're feeling safe and secure and you're feeding that area. I mean, you're bringing in the water. Well, that water element resonates with the second chakra, and the second chakra is all about relationships, creativity. And so that water is nurturing that aspect of you. So all of these intuitive things that you are doing, whether or not you know it or not, they're feeding and giving you exactly what your body needs,
Oh my
at the
God.
time.
I didn't know. And now I do. And I can't wait for this to go live because I'm going to just basically like isolate that moment and I'm going to play that to myself every morning. I did not know, but isn't that crazy and wonderful? It's very easy to kind of, you said it earlier, it's really easy to get disconnected from your body and not listen to it. But I'm so desperate to be well and I'm trying to get grounded that somehow, I guess intuitively, I'm finding the things that I need without knowing the real reason why. But of course, now I do. Thank you very
Well,
much.
you're welcome. One of the things my really important teacher said, you don't always need to know why, Laura. As people move forward in their own journeys, we don't always have to know why. Sometimes things just are the way they are. And why feeds the logical mind. But the logical mind isn't the true authentic self. It's not a true essence of who we are. So sometimes there'll be explanations and we'll be like, yes, I understand. If you're healing it, and is it really that important to know the why behind it? And I think sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes things are better left unknown.
I have to agree. I tend to be the kind of person who likes to know the why, but you're right. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to kind of let that go when it's appropriate. Sometimes it's more important to just heal, whether that's emotionally, physically, spiritually. Sometimes you're not going to get the closure that you want. It's the same idea, right? It's
Right.
it's more about the end result.
Absolutely. So, Lisa Marie, thank you so much for your time together. This has been an awesome chat. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. You've put out so much great information out there, and I know it's going to help so many people. And women out there who are experiencing dis-ease within their bodies, who are seeing variations of maybe some of the symptoms that you've had, and are maybe even struggling with getting support. What could you tell them to help them along on their journeys?
The two things come to mind. And the first, I think that's most important is to advocate for yourself. Because I think for a long time, I accepted medical advice as law.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, though, that we know our bodies. You kind of indicated that before. Intuitively, we know when the answer isn't quite right. And if you're not getting the support that you need from your doctors, medical doctors, it's really, really important. And I know it's hard, especially when you're feeling so awful, when you're feeling like you're literally dying. The last thing you want to have to do is put forth more energy, but you're the only one that will advocate for yourself because there is this societal sort of incorrect perception that it's just menopause, you just have to ride it out. Advocating for yourself, I think, is huge. And it can be finding another medical doctor. It can also be who will listen, because I do think that medicine has its place. I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting that you should avoid medication when, if you're diabetic, you're probably going to need insulin if you're a type 2 diabetic, right? If you have cancer, there are certain things you're going to have to do to beat that. However, for wellness prevention, in addition to or in place of, and sometimes it means going outside of the medical community and finding a naturopath, finding a holistic healer. So I'd say that's first, advocate for yourself. And then the second thing I would say, a little trickier, but it's something that we need to do for ourselves. One of the lessons that I've learned the hard way in this journey regarding my health is that it's really easy to sacrifice our health for our careers, for unhealthy relationships. We feel we have to put up with certain things from whether it's a parent or a partner or a friend group, pick your pick. And if you're anywhere on the spectrum between being like a high achiever or a people pleaser, it's really, really difficult. We can find ourselves working too much, putting up with too much, not being true or aligned with ourselves. And I made a huge mistake in that over the years, sometimes because I had to be in survival mode personally, sometimes because I was in an industry that was facing unusual, let's just call them challenges due to the pandemic and the fallout, after. I found myself working 10 to 12-hour days, sitting, not moving, not getting out into nature or seeing theater or performing, which I love to do, all the things that I was supposedly working for in the name of surviving financially and, or because employers expected it. And all of that sitting, all of that, being in a constant state of emergency, putting up with behaviors from people who were not treating the relationship with the same respect I had, right? It was all really detrimental to my health in ways that I'm still paying for and am correcting, but it didn't need to be that way. So it's impacted my back, my legs, my circulation, my stamina. I would just like to suggest to anyone out there that might be over dedicating themselves to work or any other issue, that it's so important to remember that when you do that, it's going to have downstream costs to other areas of your life, your health, your relationships, your spirituality, your zest for living. It hit all of those things for me. I was a walking zombie. So I think balance is something that we forget about at times of crisis, but those tough times are probably when it's most important to keep a balance in your life, because that's the only way you're going to thrive and really live.
Yeah, those are two really, really wonderful pieces of advice. Absolutely, Lisa Marie, advocating for ourselves. Well, if we don't advocate for ourselves, nobody else is going to. And one of the things that I learned when I was in the hospital was that if I don't have my health, I don't have anything. It doesn't matter how much money I have in the bank or how many friends I have or any of those things. Without my health, there's nothing. And the second part, I believe it almost seems like you're talking about drawing boundaries and how important boundaries are to draw in our lives. So I understand that part of my journey. I coach people in establishing healthy boundaries. Sometimes our boundaries are too fluid and we allow people to infiltrate them to a point that it's detrimental to us, and you're a giver and I'm a giver, and that's exactly what ended up happening for me. And eventually I just took on everything from everywhere as my own, and then my body was done. So drawing boundaries where we need to, and also a boundary with ourselves to say, you know what, self-care time is important. So whatever that looks like for me, whether it's my walk on the beach, and I need to have that for 15 minutes every day, so I need to do that for my own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, then we have to draw boundaries with ourselves as well. Those are two like really amazing pieces of advice, Lisa Marie. And of course, we are continually evolving as we have these health experiences. We're learning more about ourselves. And then it's almost like you just begin dipping your toe into a different pond. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, hang on, this isn't a pond. This goes deeper and deeper. This is like the deepest lake. There's so much that we can learn and experience about ourselves. And I think being gentle on the journey, being gentle with ourselves and recognizing that we've come a long way, which is amazing. And we still have likely lots of learning and lots of way to go. One step at a time, just trying out new things that we feel might support us in our health and our growth and evolution. And then sometimes they won't. But if we don't try, if we don't go out of our box that society essentially has created and said, these are the things that are acceptable, these are the things that aren't. If we don't go there, then we're not going to reach that level of health and purposeful living that we all, I believe, at our core are seeking. We want to live with purpose, but we can't live with purpose when we have so many external and internal constraints blocking us.
Yeah, and I think we have to give ourselves permission to do that, because there are people in your life that are going to try to make you feel guilty as though self-care is somehow selfish.
Yes.
And it's not. It's
Agreed.
not. It's necessary to and I look at it this way, there's a reason like tell you to put the oxygen mask on your face before you're supposed to do it to your child, your partner, right? If you're on a plane and it's going down, you can't give if you are passing out.
Yes.
You need to keep yourself oxygenated. And that's what all the things you've just described are really all about.
Self-care, an act of self-love, and taking care of ourselves first enables us to take care of others as well. We're so often giving to others and we just deplete. And relationships need to be reciprocal in our lives. And it doesn't mean that there needs to be a monetary exchange for things, but there's an energetic exchange of some sort. And so if you look around you and you see that there are what we call kind of these parasitic relationships whereby you feel you're giving and you're giving and you're giving, but you're really not receiving anything in return. Some of us are actually taking on that parasitic energy, then those are the times where it's so important to draw boundaries and honor ourselves. Sometimes these decisions can be really challenging to make.
Agreed. Yep.
Thank you so much for your time today, Lisa Marie. How can people listen to your podcast and connect with you and learn more about you and what you do?
Oh, yeah. I hope people will. Feel free. Reach out to me on my website, which you can find me there at lisamarieConnections.com. My Facebook and Instagram handles are the same, Lisa Marie Connections, all one word. And if you're interested in the podcast, you can go there now on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, find the trailer, click follow. I would love that. And look for episodes From Lemons to Limoncello, which will launch in February.
Love it. So fun. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you again for your time today. It was an honor chatting with you, Lisa Marie. I enjoy our conversations, and I know that this conversation is going to be so helpful for so many women out there who are seeking some sort of other path to deal with what is going on in their body.
I really hope so. We all have to kind of band together. That's what women do best, right? So
absolutely. We definitely we're stronger together. We are much stronger together.
Thank you for this time. And I learned so much. Thank you.
My pleasure always. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening today. I look forward to bringing you more opportunities to learn and grow and shift and change your perspective, perhaps to something new and something different. It is an honor always to be here, and I would love to hear about what you want to learn more about. Please go to Spotify, give me 5 stars, go to Apple, give me 5 stars and a review. I would greatly appreciate it. This is the way that this podcast can get out, so more people will have the opportunity to listen. There will be another episode dropping each week. Keep a lookout for that, Apple and Spotify. Food Feels and Banana Peels. I'm Laura Pfeiffer. You can check out more about me, learn about what I do at laurapfeiffer.com. Wishing you much love, joy, happiness, and health on your journey.